Hey y'all! Normally I don't do event guides, but with how difficult the Remnants of Twilight event is, I figured it'd probably be worth putting something out, especially considering how unique the fight's mechanics are. As always, feel free to skip to whatever timestamps you need in the description. The slideshow is also available in the description if you'd like to read it at your own pace. While this guide is mainly suited for 3-star clearing, you should also be able to clear in general and snag all the jades if you follow the principles in this guide. With that, let's begin! Day 1 features the Noontide Griffin, who is accompanied with the Moonlit Pegasus on Phase 2. As an AoE check, this fight is solved best by using the Herda, which is made evident based on its trial characters. Characters with skills and ults that can hit enemies without targeting them, aka mostly AoE or bounce, are best for this stage. The Herda, with her ult in the skill combo, with lots of teammates that also have AoE skills and ults, is the clear choice for beating this stage. Nihility options like Dot and Acheron also work pretty well, though do note that the stage specifically asks for skills and ults, meaning that Hyacines and Everknight's Memo Sprite skills, for example, do not count towards that requirement. The reason we want skills and ults specifically is because gaining extra stars is contingent on killing multiple Spirit Thieves, which have a 69 action value window to hit it with a skill or ult before it runs away. Hitting it with the correct move will reset that AV timer, switch which attack it wants to get hit by, and deal half of its max HP. So hitting it with 2 of the correct option will count as a kill. Each mob killed will also increase the vulnerability the main boss takes, starting off increasing slowly, but quickly spiking the more mobs you kill. It isn't unreasonable for the boss to hit like 300 to 500% vulnerability before it dies, and heck, the 2000% vulnerability cap is there for a reason, which creates an AoE incentive for this fight that even beats out the likes of Pure Fiction. Note that the Spirit Thief and the Meteoric Eagles are backline, similar to the Black Tide Council's move where it hides itself, so it cannot be directly targeted. And since sometimes they tend to hang on the outside of the stage, blast attacks can't always hit them reliably, making AoE and bounce the best options for nailing them. The Griffin is mostly the same if you fought it before, except it just burns as its special debuff instead of inflicting marks on your team that can eventually drain energy. In Phase 2, the Griffin is joined by the Pegasus, and its turn to attack has to perform a joint attack with the Pegasus that entangles the left 3 allies. Yikes. Similar to the Griffin, the Pegasus's mark gimmick has also been replaced with just entanglement, which honestly might be straight up worse. At least the stage is pretty easily manageable with any competent AoE DPS, though again, do be careful to have some sort of skill and ult damage if running Mono Remembrance. Maybe through like casters via skill and Tribi via ult, for example. Day 2 is our sustain check, and arguably the hardest day of them all, since depending on your roster, a good chunk of whether or not you pass boils down to enemy bounce hit RNG. As a sustain stage, naturally, several trial units are sustains, and all the ones featured here are pretty good in their own ways. Gallagher and Danhung PT have the highest numerical healing and shielding respectively, with Gallagher easily being able to heal for upwards of 5 to 6k for every AoE hit on 5 besotted enemies, combined with Tribi, who is naturally tanky and can spam both AoE attacks and DDD for self-healing, PT's energy, and just for everyone to move in general. The 3 of them make a solid core that should be the go-to for any players on a semi-budget. Hyacine, Aventurine, Luocha, and Bailu are great supplementary healers, each providing reactive healing or shielding in some form while also being solid walls themselves. Well, besides Luocha, but he has his emergency heals. March 7th can also be useful for her single target taunt, as well as her ult being able to freeze the mobs, preventing them from attacking before the countdown kills them. Lingsha is more here as a break bot, since her burst healing compared to the other premium sustains is a bit lackluster, even with an emergency Fu Yuan in tow. Other sources of CC include Welt with his action delay ult, and Misha with the bounce ult that has a really high chance to freeze, though do note that this will only CC the mobs and not the center boss since the boss is CC immune. Both RMC and Cyrene also come with a 40% delay technique, which bypasses CC checks, meaning that it can be really helpful in saving HP versus Phase 1. So while they technically aren't sustains, they can serve a pseudo-sustain role as well. And if you're looking for sources of attack or damage reduction buffs to fill in for more pseudo-sustain capabilities, Cypher, Silverwolf, Hyslins, and once again Gallagher can all offer them, which may come in handy if you're able to build them tanky enough. Of course, if you have Casterus and Phynon, they just flat out solve the stage, with both Netherwing and Kaslana able to absorb any one-time damage nuke. If you're looking to just clear though, Solo Blade, who can ult to set his HP to 50%, and Solo Mighty, who revives after dying and instantly unleashes a Godslayer Be God to end the phase, will do just fine. Fu Xuan unfortunately has her healing capped at 100% of her max HP, so she usually doesn't have enough to keep her HP positive despite her built-in damage mitigation. And Huo Huo, well, yeah, burst healing is very lacking unfortunately. Similar to Apocalyptic Shadows Pollux, which by the way is rerunning very soon, the gimmick of this stage is HP overload, where both characters and enemies' HP this time is allowed to go into the negatives. At the start of each phase, a countdown will emerge, after which it will deal damage to everyone based on their HP overload. As such, your goal is to ensure that everyone has positive HP, or at least more shield than their HP overload by the time the countdown ends. And if you're aiming for a 3-star clear, make sure that no one is negative 10,000 or lower HP at any point during the fight. Since all enemies take 99% less damage while summons still exist, you'll want to reduce those summons 250 or so HP down to 0, which any half-baked AoE should be able to do. No need to specifically spec into a DPS team. After the countdown hits is when you'll want to take down the Corroded Daemon's 25,000 or so HP. Though do be careful, as its vulnerability window only lasts until its next turn, upon which point it summons more Black Tides mobs again, and you'll have to repeat the whole cycle all over. Do note that in Phase 2, the Corroded Daemon still only gets 2 turns within the countdown, even with an immediate turn 1, due to it being 70 AV countdown instead of 80 AV, and the Daemon acting every 37 AV, but also because of that, its next turn will come very quickly after, meaning that its initial vulnerability window on Phase 2 is much harder to take advantage of. On its second turn on Phase 2, before the vulnerability window strikes, it will also deal 100% of everyone's max HP as true damage, so be prepared to tank that as well. Here's the speeds and rough damage estimates of each of the mobs. Obviously, the Corroded Daemon hits the hardest by far, but the mobs are no slouch either, hence the very real value in CCing them and keeping them down. Do note that after their HP drops below 0, they lock their own toughness, so be careful about managing them if you're trying to break and delay them, especially with Dahlia on the team. Day 3 is a pure hit count check, both in AoE and in single target, and once again our trial units reflect that. Shame that none of them are naturally on Eagle, but oh well, not like we can use trial units in Nightmare difficulty stages anyways. Since HP is replaced by hit count based HP, your base HP, attack, defense, all those don't matter. Only your speed and energy regeneration rate, and effect hit rate if you need it, are relevant versus this stage, making Eagle and Von Wag optimal on like 99% of the cast unfortunately. Since this fight features a lot of attacks that hit from the left and right, Memo Sprites are good for spreading out those hits versus more enemies, and the Golion in particular does extremely well here due to also being insanely fast, and each of her joint attacks counting as 2 hits, in addition to Garment Maker adding hits of its own. If you don't have her though, Moza is a pretty nice hit count generator, perfect for whittling down the single target HP of the Praetor, while also being able to dodge all manner of attacks thanks to being departed. Make sure you have some form of AoE or CC in order to deal with the side mobs as well, since taking care of them is essential to winning this fight, both for mitigating damage and preventing the enemy from getting a lot of healing. There are quite a few free-to-play strategies for this stage in particular, with the core of Moza, RMC, Asta, plus your AoE of choice easily being able to zero cycle it without too much RNG. Just do mind your placement, making sure to put your tankiest or most expendable units in the center, especially since in a 5-character team, the center character will be usually taking 2 damage from each of your Praetor's double swipe turns rather than just 1. This can be like your Mems, who can die without losing you any stars. It could then be your Moza, who will often disappear and so doesn't take much hits in the first place. It's up to you. Sustains are much less mandatory versus stage 3 since heals and shields don't do anything to help increase your HP count, with the only way of increasing it being through earning kills, in which case the unit that gets kill credit also gets 1 HP in return. This includes finishing off Praetor's Phase 1 by the way, so that might be useful to keep in mind. All allies start with 8 HP, while the Praetor has 20 in Phase 1 and 40 in Phase 2. As for the other mobs, the Warrior and Archer have 9 and 6 HP, dealing single target and AoE attacks respectively for 1 damage, while the Trope and Philosopher both have 8 HP and are exclusive to Phase 2. The Trope gives all enemies plus 1 HP upon spawning, and 3 more to a single target whenever it acts, while the Philosopher speeds up a random enemy by 300% whenever it acts. Yeah, not very fun to deal with at all. Pray that it doesn't buff the Fury Praetor itself. You can also see everyone's approximate speeds here, as well as how much earlier they spawn in both phases 1 and 2. As for the Praetor's attack patterns, it does a simple left and right swipe on turn 1, and summons up to 4 Fury mobs on turn 2, 2 archers and 2 warriors, should it have the space, which is followed by another swipe. Repeat for the rest of phase 1. On phase 2, it summons 4 more Fury mobs upon phase change, 1 of each type, then attacks with another swipe. Turn 2 has it summon up to 4 more Fury mobs, then charges for a big turn 3 attack that deals 1 AoE damage, plus 1 more for every additional mob on field. You may want to deliberately slow down your AoE kills until turn 2 hits, just so that you aren't stuck trying to burst down a fresh set of Fury reinforcements before getting hit by a nuke for over half your team's max HP. Moving on to stage 4, we have a multi-DPS check, with one side hitting hard and the other side encouraging a high hit count. You can probably guess which trial character corresponds to which requirement. That being said though, it's much better to try and craft a cohesive team, preferably with a sustain, than try and cobble together a mix of what this stage recommends. Popular examples include the Herta and Anaxa, Break with Adalia, and especially Firefly with her own self-healing, Dot-Karan, which should get even stronger with the incoming Black Swan buffs, allegedly, and Mono Remembrance as a whole. The usual suspect of version 3 supports all work pretty well as hit count adders, with Cypher being especially noteworthy for being able to collect damage on the boss she isn't facing and using that to help the boss that she is. Very cool. Since sustain and buffs can be shared across the whole team, AoE buffers will be by far the strongest, unless you're running Phynon, in which case using his ult makes the fight a solo carry. Yeah, even with both the enemies dealing double the damage and taking half, he still easily wipes the floor with them both. This fight's win condition is to kill both bosses at the same time, while splitting your DPS 50-50. Your choice. If you don't kill one boss before the other's next turn, then it respawns with 40% max HP, so not the end of the world per se, but it does force you to kill them both at the same time should you desire to best this stage. And if you want to get full stars, you really don't want them reviving at all. The Black Tide Champion side, or the Dark Duelist as they call it here, has a super buff version of Corrosion that pretty much turns all your missing HP into Corrosion and cuts your damage by over 2/3 until you restore all of it. Healer check much? The other side, featuring the Fury Praetor, has the usual war armor mechanics, but at a much lower 3 max stacks to accommodate for only facing half your team at once. Breaking this war armor will delay its action by 20%, deal 5% max HP, and an extra 2% per hit while still broken, and regenerate some max energy for the breaking ally. As such, it's definitely the easier of the two to take down, especially if you're actually breaking it to further delay its next action, and keep the war armor broken. Do mind that they also have summons though, whom they act in tandem with. So despite their relatively slow speeds, they can hurt a lot with their combo attacks if you aren't careful, especially in the Dark Duelist case since dipping below 100% max HP nerfs your damage by a lot. And finally, we have Day 5, which is a pretty simple DOT and attack spam check, similar to Day 3's attack spam requirements, just with dot and action forward units seeing a bit more of the spotlight. With the main damage threat scaling off of max HP, building your defense followed by your HP is probably your best bet for clearing in a reasonable amount of time. And since your main damage source can also be primarily max HP, not scaling off of your offensive stats, there's no need to worry about building attack or crit either. Kinda like the stage 3 requirements with any attacks and high speed being good, just now with encouraging tank stats on top as well as being DOT favorable. The main source of damage this fight for most will probably be the fish, so having high speed and action advancers to enable as many fish turns as possible is extremely helpful. Just remember that the fish share a path with the original ally they were transformed from, so Sunday cannot, sadly, advance a fish that used to be a Harmony ally. On a related note, the biggest source of decision making in this fight is deciding whether to skill for more damage, for more true damage DOT procs, or to basic and stack up those true damage DOTs, but without detonating it and saving that ally skin. In Phase 1, it's usually safe to skill once or twice before self-blowing up each fish's lifespan in order to preserve the 3-star requirement, whereas in Phase 2, it may not be safe to do so at all if it means taking a hit from the Dark Sun Griffin. Ultimately, it's your call to make, as how safe a fish is varies from fight to fight, and especially if you have someone like Fu Xuan who can mitigate damage. Expanding on exactly what this new DOT is, it's an Ice-type DOT, called Glacial Erosion. It deals 2.5% max HP per stack to enemies, and 10% to allies. Sure, it might seem unfairly weighted against us, but seeing how often we get to proc it compared to them, I'd say it's pretty fair. Look at how bad Pure Fiction Cocolia gets chunked by the Bubble Hound bleeds every time she returns, for example. Unlike Pure Fiction Cocolia though, we luckily aren't bound to Kafka if we want to detonate these DOTs over and over again. After any 5 attacks, yes, including fish attacks and follow-ups this time, one ally of your choice gets transformed into a fish and immediately acts. This fish inherits 40% of the ally's max HP, 2 times their speed, and the rest of the ally stats 1-to-1. They can either basic and blow itself up to return the ally and apply 1 Glacial Erosion stack as a blast attack, or skill and apply 1 Glacial Erosion as a blast attack, followed by a detonation of all Glacial Erosion stacks. This damage, being based off of max HP, scales really high really quickly, and so knowing how many times you can get away with proccing detonations without letting the fish die on their own is the key to 3-starring the stage. This is especially important since you can't heal or shield them, with the only way to keep them alive for longer being damage reduction and mitigation, which Fu Xuan just so happens to have. Finally, a use for our Master Diviner in the Great 26. Here are the speed stats of all the enemies, as well as a general description of the attacks they each perform. Note that if you're focusing down the lady, the fish should be pretty quick to die, and that the more AoE threatening attacking Griffin is Phase 2 exclusive, meaning you'll also have to deal with it when your allies have more Glacial Erosion stacks accumulated. Because guess what? Those DOT stacks are unremovable for your team. So while it's not exactly spelled out explicitly, this is definitely a damage race fight, where you're playing a constant tightrope between rushing damage through the mechanics before the DOT kills you, and also bailing before your fish get killed. So what do I think of this event overall? Well, personally, with how much I love exploring DPS kits beyond just their ability to output damage, this stage, which tests so many things other than raw damage, is the easiest Grand Slam in my eyes. It's not a perfect event for sure, higher difficulty level aside, which I enjoy but can understand others being frustrated by. The difficulty in Day 2 in particular is really frustrating since it just boils down to hit RNG. It's like playing for sustainless 0 cycles all over again, except the 3 sustains in my team can't stop my Dan from sometimes dipping below minus 8000 HP in a single volley. That being said, well, when's the next time I'll get to use Misha, Moza, Asta, or for crying out loud, Fire Trailblazer in Optimal Clear? Even amongst limited units, often are we going to see Aglaya be the top answer for a stage, or Phaenon warp the fight mechanics to a game-breaking degree? It's a whole new and, most importantly, diverse and mostly free-to-play friendly meta to explore. Sure, a lot of the stages can just be trivialized by a mix and match of Remembrance units, but even in that case, they have their own bad matchups in Day 1. It sure is nice to have an event where the gimmick runs completely against HP inflation, with the exception of Days 1 and 4, since, well, without it, HSR actually becomes quite a diverse game with a lot of room for unique solutions and team comps. Between this and Currency Wars, it's been a lot of fun playing units in reimagined metas, and honestly, if it keeps up, I might even be okay with the way endgame is going, so long as every unit is given somewhere to shine with real incentive. Man, does Remnants of Twilight make me yearn for some new 4-stars though, especially now that every single one of them is finally at E6 on my account. Even if they aren't the best at pumping out raw damage, they sure are unique and fun, and this event served as a very special reminder of that. Thanks for watching.